Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We are so glad to have you all here. Today, we have Mr. Tarun with us. He's the co founder and CTO of Econscot with an
We are so
experience of
glad to
10
have
plus
you all
years.
here. Today we
And he
have
loves to work
Mr.
with
Tarun with
JavaScript,
us. He's
Vue.js,
the co-founder and
GraphQL,
CTO of
Docker, CI/CD,
Conscot
and
with
more.
an
We are
experience
so
of
glad to
10
have
plus
you all
years.
here.
Today we
And he
have
loves to work
Mr.
with
Tarun with
JavaScript,
us. He's
Vue.js,
the co-founder and
GraphQL,
CTO of
Docker, CI/CD,
Conscot
and more.
with an experience of 10 plus years. Today
And
we
he
have
loves to work
Mr.
with
Tarun with
JavaScript,
us.
Vue.js,
He's the co-founder
GraphQL,
and CTO of
Vue.js, GraphQL.
Hello everyone. As Jyoti introduced, I'm Tarun Mangukiya. I'm co-founder and CTO of Icon Scout, and I usually do work with JavaScript, Vue.js, Docker, CI/CD, and more. So I think Jyoti, we can start the session, right? With
Yes,
JavaScript,
sure, you can.
Vue.js, Docker, CI/CD, and okay, perfect. Yeah, so wait. Okay, I think my screen is visible to all of you. You can reach me on Tarun Mangukiya on Twitter or any other places. For any questions you have during the session or after the session, you feel free to reach out to me. So I think let us start our event and let us talk about what is GraphQL. And yeah, so the basic point around our today's discussion is regarding what is GraphQL, why should we use it, like what are the advantages, or what issues have we faced earlier with the APIs, right? Then how can we use it, right? So what are the points, or what are the steps to use it, or different methods to use it, and then I'll show you a little bit small example of GraphQL with Hasura, right? They're like making an API, capturing the data or updating the data and stuff like that. Okay, so it's total overall today's agenda, and let us start with what part, right? So as the name suggests, GraphQL is a query language, right? So it's open source and it's been developed by Facebook in 2012, and they open sourced it since 2015. So it's a basically query language for our APIs, right? So what we can do is with GraphQL is that we can basically retrieve different type of data from our from the backend, right? It's you can say it's the same as APIs, but it has more features which we'll discuss in the in this presentation, and more advantages for both front end and back end, both the developers, right? So it's the same as APIs. It is used to communicate between client and server, right? So the basic example is something like this. So the thing is, the main part of GraphQL is that everything is defined, right? So when you talk about GraphQL, so let us say we have a user with ID and name, right? And on so we have defined that our in from our APIs we can retrieve this ID and name, both the things, right? From backend, what we do is, or backend engineers usually do is they write a database function or something using which they return us users name or IDs, or let's say if we have let's say we if we talk about library management type of system, then we can retrieve books, their categories, authors, everything using the this GraphQL API, right? So with all the data that we are sending to the client from backend perspective, from server's perspective, all of them are being resolved by some different functions, right? So don't worry about this thing. I mean, this is pretty basic thing. You will understand this thing once we dive into the session. Okay, so just remember one thing: everything is defined, like everything is a type, and they have some type of resolvers, right? Like yeah. So the first thing comes, why GraphQL, right? Like what were the problems that we had with APIs, or like why should we use it? What are the advantages of using GraphQL, right? So as I told you, for the first thing is, when you talk about the API, so you do not know what will be the output of, let's say, if that's a user endpoint, right? Or let's say it's a book endpoint, or it's a listing book endpoint, right? So you do not know what will be the output of that API. You need to make that API call, and then only you can know, okay, I can get book ID, or let's say book title, or description, ISBN, or categories, or author, based on the API call I make, right? So in terms of the API, there is nothing is defined. They're defined, right? But in GraphQL, what we do from the first point, from the first step, is we define everything, right? So like this, the same way we work on our databases, right? We create, let's say, books table, we create authors table, we create category table, right? The same way everything is defined in GraphQL, right? So there are two things. One is types, and second one is fields, right? So type is something, you can call it as a table, right? So we, let's say, we have a book table, right? So book, author, category, all these are called types, right? And all these are predefined, right? And the other part is fields, right? So every type has different fields, right? So for example, book can have ISBN, book can have title, book can also have a description, or let's say list of categories, right? Then it may have an author object, right? So when you talk about GraphQL, it's a totally schema driven approach for API, right? What advantage can schema give is that there are three different advantages for using schema driven approach, right? First thing is powerful development tools, right? So as I told you, when we make an API call, so we do not know what will be the output, or what will the variable name that backend developer might be returning, right? So the problem with that approach is that you have to ask a backend developer, like, give me this data or that data and stuff like that, right? And again, you do not know anything, so you will make an API call, and then you will check whether that response is proper or not, right? But here, in case of GraphQL, everything is defined, right? So you already know that if I want to get a book, or if I want to get the list of book, I will have ISBN, title, description, category, author. I will have an access to those things, right? So what we can do is, we can, for developers also, we can create let us say high-end code editors, in which we can, get auto suggestions regarding the API response that we are going to get, right? So this makes our development process very very fast, right? For example, if you want a book, right? So you already know that, okay, we have an author already available in the book, right? So if we need to show that author in the UI, then we can pass that to the request, and we can get it in the response, right? We do not we do not need to tell the backend developer to add it manually, right? Because everything is defined, right? It's a kind of graph, right? Then yeah, as I told you, you get what you want, or what you need, right? So the thing is that with GraphQL, we define all the fields, or we define every type that we need, right? So if we need a book, right? So we tell GraphQL API, like, I mean, GraphQL endpoint, that I need a book with title and ISBN only, right? If you need title, ISBN, authors, you write it in the request itself. Right. So this gives two more advantages that we will discuss in next two steps in part of the session. One more thing is no versioning, right? So what happens with API is that whenever we want to add a new, let's say, new field, or whenever we want to remove some field, right, we cannot do it easily, because there might be. So the thing is, when as a developer, when we are working with product, right? So we might have mobile apps. It may be in Android, iOS. We may also have web app, right? So the thing is, we might need to have different APIs, and whenever we want to upgrade our responses, let's say we have earlier we had a list of books with its title, description, ISBN, author, and categories, everything in the list itself, right? But due to some reason or due to anything, we thought that we do not need to show categories on the listing page. Right? So if we want to remove that, the thing that can happen is it can also break earlier mobile apps, right? Or earlier, so in web it will be automatically deployed, but in earlier mobile apps, the people who are using older apps, they still need those data, right? So what we need to do, we need to create one more version of the API, let's say v2, v3, v4, or something like that, and then we need to maintain these APIs continuously, right? But in case of GraphQL, we are getting what we want, right? So if we do not send that we need categories in the response, we won't get it, right? So we do not need to maintain versioning separately. One more thing is, GraphQL also supports many parameters like deprecation of some field, right? So let's say we earlier had ISBN field name, right? But we changed it to ID, right? So we can mark ISBN field as a deprecated, and in the developer tools that we are using, it will show that this has been deprecated, right? So that the developer who are using the API can change those variables to the newer variable that we have provided, right? So the schema driven approach gives us, binding or close control over our data, right? Sometimes I have also seen, I think if you are a front end developer, right? So we might also see that the backend developer gives different variable names in the response, and he asks different variable names in the request, right? So this is something I usually avoid, and using GraphQL, everything is defined as I told you, right? All the variables names are defined, right? So the thing is, backend developer won't be changing those variable name as he wants or as he likes, right? So that is one more advantage over GraphQL, right? Then the main two problem that we had with APIs, right? Those are called overfetching and underfetching, right? So, if you remember, or I think if you are working with API, so you do know that any listing API you see, they will have fixed response. Let's say, for example, in the screenshot on the right, you can see book has, like, the backend developer is providing list of books which has ID, title, description, author, category, right? What if we decide that we are not showing authors and categories in the listing page, right? So what happens is that this causes extra network bandwidth for sure, right? Apart from that, it also causes it also makes API slow, right? Because the backend developer is fetching these variables from the database, and this makes queries slower. Right. So this is called overfetching. So overfetching is something in which we do not need the data, but due to the API, like fixed API response, we are getting it, right. And this can occur as we might be working with different platforms. So in the web, we might show more fields. In the mobile, we show like lesser fields, right? Due to the UI itself, right. So this causes overfetching issue in the API, right? But as I told you earlier, with GraphQL, you will only get the fields that you want or that you need in the UI, right? So, like if you do not request categories field or author field, it won't be there, right? So, this can certainly make APIs like GraphQL APIs faster over the traditional API REST APIs. And one more thing is it can also save our network bandwidth, right? So yeah, obviously this is like a KB, but when you talk about, let's say, people like Facebook, right? So Facebook developed this GraphQL technology, right? Like it's basically a kind of schema, right? So Facebook developed this thing. So when you are working at Facebook, so every byte that you are sending, that is affecting a billion people, right, who are using Facebook on daily basis, right? So overfetching can be a big network headache when it comes to server providers, right? And it causes extra bandwidth, extra CPUs, and everything, right? So that is something, even as a backend developer, we want to avoid, or we do not want that, so that we can make our APIs fast, right? Second thing is underfetching, right? So underfetching is something, like like I think many of you are already designers. So when we are playing with UI, we add many fields, we remove many fields in each iteration to test it out, right? But what happens with API is that they are mostly fixed. So let's say we have the version 1 of API, right? And that's giving us ISB and title, description, and author, right? It is not giving us categories. Right? So what happens in this case, let's say by some chance we want to show categories in the listing page, so we are stuck with that, right? So to resolve it, to resolve this, what we do usually is we make sometimes more API calls, and we try to show that so that backend developer doesn't need to add that in the response, because it will otherwise it will create overfetching in the API, right? And yeah, so underfetching is something in which the backend developer is not returning those set of results, and we need that we need to show that to the in the UI, right? And this can also cause a problem for front end or from client side, right? So this can cause multiple network requests. We might make multiple network requests, and we fetch them sequentially or in parallel. And it also makes overall UI experience slower, right? Because in the first call we are getting the list of books, and then we are also fetching categories after that, right after that, right? So this can cause underfetching issue. Right. So this is something like underfetching or overfetching. Both are the things which can be resolved with GraphQL, because we are getting what we need, right, or what we like ask for in the request, right? Yeah. Then certainly, if when we get an access to tools like GraphQL, right? So the thing is, it can rule them all, right? So the main purpose that many companies are slowly introducing or slowly going into GraphQL is because they can use the same API across web, their mobile, their Android, or any developer platform they are developing app or product for. Right. So why this can be a good thing in GraphQL is because, why this is only for GraphQL is because sometimes we also see that companies do develop APIs. One is for mobile and one is for web. They need to maintain these APIs continuously. They need to have more developers to manage and do the stuff for this thing, right? If something is broken in mobility, it may also be broken in web experience, right? So we're using GraphQL backend, as I told you earlier. If you go to the earlier sheet, right, earlier for the very first example. So the thing is, every response you are getting, those are in resolvers, right? So if you request for book as category inside book, then only you will get that response, right? So this makes to have a single API for all the platforms, right? So for web you can ask for categories, for mobile you can ignore them. Right. So this can faster like both front end and back end developer experience. GraphQL can give us rich experience in terms of the code tools that we are using. I'll show you in the example part at the end of the session. Like how can it be useful for front end developers or back end developers to see the full API and everything from a single code editor or online tool, right? So this can be useful to have a single endpoint, and we'll get anything that we want or anything that we ask for, right? So we don't need to tell backend developer that, hey, I need categories in this API response, please send me along with that, right? Because it's already defined in the schema, and if that's defined in the schema, then it will be automatically resolved and it will be provided to the client, right? So client side developer doesn't have to do anything new. Backend developer is also free to work on the things he's working on, right? So this can be very useful to both client and server both, right? To both the end, right? So one API can rule them all, right? So the thing is, these are the issues: the underfetching, overfetching, versioning, obviously code experience, like code development experience, right? All these are issues that we have faced in APIs, right? I think you are already aware that with APIs we need to ask a backend developer that what are the responses and everything, and we need to wait for them, right? So all these are issues are there, and with GraphQL we can get what we want, so we can resolve these issues, right? All of them, like as we discussed, right? But how GraphQL works exactly, right? So let us look into that part. So GraphQL has three main points. The 2 points are which are first 2 points are something that we already get into the APIs. Third one is something that we that is something that is useful for developing real-time applications. So first thing is querying the data, right? So uh, that is something like that is retrieving the data, right? So we need let's say big book response. So we can write a query for that, and we can get that data. We can fetch that data using queries, right? If we want to create, update, or delete the data, we can use mutation, right? So mutation is something that is used to update the data or modify the data, right? Third thing is subscription. So subscription is something which is used to watch over, like it's kind of a watcher, right? So you can watch over the data, and whenever the data changes, we get the updated data in real time using WebSockets. Right. So there are main three parts which for which we write the syntax for. First is query, mutation, and subscription. Let us check out like let us see the example syntaxes for this for all three. Right. So first thing is query. Right. So as I told you, query is something using which you can retrieve the data. Right. So for GraphQL, the best thing about GraphQL is that like it has a single endpoint, right? So in APIs we have, let's say, api.mydomain.com or api.example.com/v1/users, right? Then for books we have v1/books. Then for categories we have v1/categories and stuff like that, right? But in GraphQL, what we do is we tell our GraphQL endpoint that we need this many data, right? So in this case, we have only single endpoint, right? It may be, let's say, graphql.example.com or example.com/GraphQL or anything, right? And through the single endpoint, we can create a post request, and we can ask for the data that we want. Right. So every query starts with a single thing, that is query. The syntax for query is as shown in the right. You write query, then you write that query name. It can be anything. This is not dependent on the backend at all. You can keep it. This is mostly used for front end caching and all. So I wrote books for that, the name of query, and then in the curly braces, I am asking for books, right? And inside the books, I want ISBN, I want title, I want description. Then I also want, so author. Inside author, I want ID and name, right? So the thing is, whenever I request like my GraphQL endpoint with this query, it will return me the list of books with ISBN, title, description, author, and inside author object we will have ID and name, right? So books will be an array object, right? So this makes us easy to, if we do not want author, we can remove it. So this enables us to do nesting inside this thing. So let's say if we have inside author, we also have some other nesting, right? Maybe country or anything, right? So if this GraphQL enables us to get nested responses without changing our backend, right? So that is good part for this thing. We also can pass the arguments with all the thing. For example, if you have avatar in author, right? So you can pass size equal to 40 or size equal to thumb or this and that. So you can also pass arguments with any field, and you can get those type of response from the backend, from the server, right? So this is a sample query that I have written, and using which you will get books with along with the author, list of books along with the author, right? If you want categories, you can also add categories field in here. In categories, if you need ID and name, so you can write it the same way I did it with author, right? I'll show you in the example itself in the later stage. Then second part is mutation, right? So mutation, as I told you earlier, mutation is something that is used to modify the data, right? So this can be used to create a new data, this can be used to update the existing data, or this can also be used to delete the existing data, yeah, right? So you can consider query as our get endpoint usually, and for mutation you can consider them as a page request, yeah, or post request or delete method request, right? So for all three method we have single term called mutation in GraphQL. right? So for example, in the right side, what I am doing is I'm updating the books by primary key. My, like in this case, I have kept ISBN as my primary key, and I'm updating the data as, like, I'm updating the primary key. Sorry, I'm updating the title of this book as the structures or whatever I want to keep. Right. In the same mutation, I can also get the data in the response. Right. So I updated this book, and if I want to see whether the title has been updated or not, so I can ask for that data in the response. I can also add more fields, because update book will always respond a book, right? Object type book, right? So you can list them down in the, like, the curly braces, and it will respond you with the data, right? So the syntax for mutation is same as query. You just change query with mutation, and name that is not relevant for uh, that is used for front end caching and all, and then in the curly braces, name of that mutation. So in this case, the name of mutation is update books by underscore pk, right? Primary key, right? So that's the name of mutation that I have passed the arguments in that. So first is the ISBN, and then I'm setting the data as, like, I can pass title, I can pass description, I can also pass, let's say, any other field that's available in the book, right? So this is used for updating the data, right? In the same way, there can be delete or any other endpoint available, right? Then this is the third part, is that is subscription. This is the most interesting part when it comes to GraphQL, right? So the thing is, in today's world, we are working on many real-time applications that we want to show the new data to user without them refreshing the page, right? So earlier we used to do this thing, or in case of APIs, we used to do this thing using using WebSocket and all, and certainly GraphQL also uses WebSocket for the same. And using subscription, what we can do is we can get real-time update of our any query. So for example, uh, the thing is, what will happen using subscription is that it will open up a graph, sorry, it will open up WebSocket endpoint, and it will listen for that endpoint. It will listen to that endpoint, and whenever server sends updated data, the data in the UI will be updated automatically, right? And yeah, so in this case, I'm opening, I'm asking for authors, and I'm listing basically authors with their ID and name, right? So whenever any user changes the name or ID of, sorry, name of that author, I will get notified in my client, right? So my client can be web, it can be mobile, iOS or Android, any other device, right? So I'll show you this thing in example at the end, right? So there are three things mean that we need to remember. One is querying the data, that means retrieving the data. Mutation is for updating the data, right? Those who are into, I think, React, they already know what is mutation, right? And then a subscription is something used to listen to the data, right? And this can work in the complex example also, like the subscription, right? Yeah. So let us go in. I mean, it's the enough talk, right? So let us go and check how these things work, right? And I'll show you the exact same example. I have created a GraphQL API with books and categories and authors, and we'll show how can we query that data. Okay, so if anybody know, there is a tool called Hasura, which is widely used for uh, uh, developing back GraphQL APIs, right? So in this thing, yeah. So these are, yeah, as I told you, everything is defined, right? So in query, we can see like every, like what responses that we get, right? So we have different type of queries available over here, right? I haven't like requested anything. I just added my endpoint over here, right? If you want to try it out, like you can also check this. This is open URL for now. So I have authors, then book categories, books categories, everything available, right? And if I want to, let us say, get categories, that's what I can do is I can write a query, category, I mean, name of that query, and we want categories Yeah, so if you check here, we are getting intelligence of what we can retrieve, right? So this is the best part of this thing, GraphQL, that we already know what are the resources available, right? So this GraphQL, the tool name is GraphQL, so it already knows that there is a query called categories. That's I'm clicking that query. Inside that query, what I have available. So I think I have ID. Yeah, I do have an ID, and I need title, and let us also return a description, right? So I have like written a simple query which fetches categories. This is the name of query that is also like that is defined in our schema, right? And we have ID, title, and description. And I think one thing is for sure, you do not have to worry about like whether you get a schema or not. What you can do is once you in any GraphQL tool, whenever you put an URL of your endpoint, all the schema will be fetched automatically, right? So and this is the best part of our developer experience, right? And once I run this query, I will get a response. I think my instance might be off. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so in the response we are getting categories with title, ID, description, all the things, right? So if I, let's say in the future update I do not need description, right? So I can just remove it in the query and it will be, yeah, it will be removed from the response itself, right? So this is very cool thing, right? Let us try books query. I'll just remove this part and I know books, right? In the books, I know there is an ISBN. See, as I'm typing, I'm getting the suggestions, right? And I need title of that book, and let us try to fetch that for a while. Yeah, so I'm getting books with the title and ISBN, right? And let us say in my desktop, sorry, in my mobile, I also need to show author of that book, right? So I'm going to author, and inside author, I need ID, and I need, let us say, name. Okay, so when I click run query and I'm getting this response, right? So this is very easy to work on, right? And let us say due to like the designer says, I also want to show categories with tags, right? So what we can do, we can just add categories, maybe genre if you are bookkeeper, so genre, right? And in categories, I have ID, and then I think, okay, sorry. Inside category, I have one more category. This is due to Hasura itself. And then here I have ID and description. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, inside categories, I can get ID and description both. Right. So this makes very easy for us as a front end or as a client or front end developer that we can easily get the data that we want, right? And apart from that, one more thing is also clear that for backend developers, this is also like peace of mind that they do not need to update their APIs continuously, right? So nothing will be broken as you update your apps or APIs, right? So this can be a good part in books, sorry, in GraphQL, right? Let us go and try to write a mutation, right? So in the mutation, as I write a mutation, update books, this can be anything, update a book, right? And then what are the available mutations? So yeah, in all the GraphQL tool, there is like this GraphQL, we have docs also available, right? So when you go to docs, we have three, as I told you, we have three main types: query, mutation, and substitution, right? So inside query, I can see all the queries that's available, right? That is shown in the left. For this is the part of Hasura, but yeah, the GraphQL is the center part which shows all this documentation. So this is basically a documentation for our API, right? We also might not need to write it separately, right? So in the query, we requested books earlier. Yeah, in the books, right? Here you can also see that we have extra parameters with arguments which we can pass, and we can basically get the data, right? Let us try, like we were looking for mutation, so let us see and what mutations that we have available. So we have multiple mutations available. Let us try with the simple one. I think insert authors, I suppose. Yeah, insert authors, right? So we have insert authors, and then inside that, yeah, so in the response, let's say we need just how many affecting rows, or wait, there might be, yeah, insert author one. Let us insert just single author, right? And in that, in the response, we will need ID of that author, right? Now we also need to pass the parameter, right? So for parameters, what it is suggesting is that we need to have an object of author insert input, right? So in that, we can pass author, ID, and name, three things, right? So in the object, let us pass name as, okay. Do I have a good author name over here? Okay, I think I know him. Okay, so I have just written a simple query, sorry, simple mutation, which is, sorry, this is create author. This doesn't matter. This thing doesn't matter at all. Okay, insert authors one, like I want to insert single author with name Amish Tripathi, right? This is basically, this is something that's defined by our backend developer, right? And you also, like, you, once you have this and access to this list, right, this is not something that's created manually. This is automatic from the GraphQL endpoint, right? So this is called fetching the schema, right? So once you fetch the schema, you can get an access to everything, right? So in that, I got that I have this mutation, which in that I need to pass an object, a key, and in object I can pass whatever the data I want to update, right? So let us go and play, like run this mutation. I'll close this part. Yes, and play. Okay, yeah. So author has been inserted with ID 13. Okay, so it should be Amish Tripathi. Let us write the query again. Query doesn't matter. I don't want to write authors. Let us query the authors with ID and name. Okay, and I'll fetch it. And 13 number, yeah, Amish Tripathi. Right. So, like as you saw, this is very easy to work on, right? And it's really easy, right? Let us go and check subscriptions, right? Because I think that is something you all might be interested in very much, right? So for subscription, let me do one thing. I'll just duplicate this table because I need to watch the data in separate table, right? And yeah, okay. So I have already written a subscription that fetches author, and it's a subscription is same as query. You just replace query from with the subscription key. That's it. And I have started the my request, right? And as you can see, I can have like all the data over here, right? And this is a real-time connection. So if I insert author over here from here, let me just control Z all these things. Okay. Do we have any other good author name? Okay, let me go to my Amazon. I might have some my card. Yeah, Nick Del. So I'll, okay. So in this thing, if you see, we have author still ID 13. That is Amish Tripathi. That to be inserted using mutation, right? Now what we are doing, we are watching our authors, and we will also create one more this thing over here. Okay, with author with name Ray Delio. Okay, and I'm running this mutation, and boom. Okay, ID 14, and in the right side tab, we got an update automatically. Right. So this is like pretty much easy as I told you. If you want to go with the books, we can also go with the book. I'll just stop this thing, subscription books, and query, sorry, books, list of books with ID, ISBN. Then the insertion of a book will be hectic. Yeah, okay, it will be hectic. Title and description. Yeah, it certainly will be hectic. Let me see if that works. Mutation, and then there are mutations named insert what books books one is there. Okay, and in the return I want to get an ID. I'll pass an object of a book. This works. Book has name or title. It has name. And so I'll, sorry, it has name. and also need an ISBN. Do I have an ISBN in here? Oh, come on, seriously. Okay, let me just keep any other ID for now. ISBN, yes, name. The name is not there. Okay, title is there. Yeah, see, you can also see like what fields are here, right? So it auto suggests this thing. I have title, so it showed me an error, and this is the mutation for work. Yeah, see, here also we are getting an error that there is no ID in books, right? So it is ISBN basically, right? So I'll query this thing. Hope this works. And okay, author ID should not be null. Okay, principal life and work. The author ID is I think 14. We inserted. I'll have also to I'll also have to pass author ID, and that is 14. Okay, yeah, it's been inserted. Right, and in the right, yep, we got it using real-time connection. Right. So this is very easy to work on. I think you got it right, and yeah, I think we are open for questions for now. Example is done. Yeah, we are open for any questions you have in the audience. Uh, Hello, anyone there? Okay.
Yes, Tarun. I don't think there are any questions as of now.
Okay.
Okay, Tarun, thank you so much for taking such an amazing session. We were really honored to have you on board with us, and I think this is our first collaboration. This is your
Yeah.
first collaboration with GirlsCrypt. I hope you really enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it. So I don't think there are any questions
Mm-hmm.
from our side. But I had one question.
Yes.
Like talking about the GraphQL, uh,
Mm-hmm.
since it has simplified so many technologies, and it can be incorporated with so many other technologies, but
Yes.
we are not really talking enough about it. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason behind it?
I think the major reason behind that is basically, it's the GraphQL. Like the thing is, it requires like creating a whole new set of APIs, right? So
Right,
that is something the many companies are not ready to do, right? They are not ready to try it out from the first stage, as they are not sure of, right?
right,
But when I had a conversation with some of the people from Swiggy also, right? So Swiggy, I think in the lockdown, Swiggy developed this a little site that shows dishes and their recipes, right? So they have started using GraphQL for easy development and stuff like that, right? So companies are slowly adopting this technology. They are trying it for their MVPs and everything. If you know, GitHub is already like moving to GraphQL. So GitHub's V4 version API is totally on GraphQL, right? So they are even the mobile apps that we have of GitHub, all of them are on GraphQL, right?
right,
Mobile apps, desktop. So this is new, obviously a new technology, and many for example, for many front end framework also, the libraries or packages might not be available, right?
right,
Or like this is around a year back, but if you talk about that right now, so the any technology, front end, back end, or anything you talk about, or for all of them, the GraphQL packages are available. So for React, for Vue, React Native, like from backend perspective, Laravel, Python, for all the tools, we do have available packages which are very stable, and companies like GitHub and Swiggy, all these are using it, right? So This is very people are starting to adopt this slowly, but yeah, it will take some time to fully adapt it, to explore it. And sometimes the thing is, many people even do not know, like, whether they can go with it for long run, right? So they need an advisor who has worked on that thing, right? So yeah, so it's more about awareness, and I think I would say awareness plus time also, both of them.
Okay, just the last question. So,
Yes, for
like,
sure.
what do you think? I mean, I don't have any idea. That's why I'm asking. The GraphQL is being widely used in the companies or tech giants right now. So,
uh,
is it the scenario?
yeah, so I think all of you do know a new Facebook UI, right? So new Facebook UI is totally powered by GraphQL.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, new Facebook, GraphQL, sorry, GitHub's new APIs. Many other Indian companies also have started using GraphQL. There are many companies who are working on blockchain APIs over GraphQL. So yeah, like it's a beginning, but yeah, many like Facebook, GitHub, both of them have already migrated to GraphQL for full APIs.
yeah, right, right.
Yeah,
So, thank you so much. It was a really,
welcome.
really great session, and I really enjoyed a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thank you.
being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you everyone whosoever joined us today in this GraphQL session. We were honored to have you all. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.